Hello, everyone. I'm back with more of, Ted? Tom? Mr. Gospticlehead. I bet you thought I wasn't going to come back to this, but here I am, for some reason.
Take a big picture approach. Answering particular challenges, apologetic challenges, can feel like whack-a-mole, okay? A particular challenge pops up, it's raised, and then you go to whack it down, and then another one comes popping up, and then another one over here, and it just feels like that's what you're doing. You're just knocking down these challenges. Well, I want to suggest a better approach.
Oh, let me guess. Stop playing the game and run away? Or pretend you're playing some other game where you don't have to whack moles down, and then once you lose miserably, you tell the guy in the booth, "Hey, I won! Give me my teddy bear now."
Do you think that whack-a-mole would be easier if you could hit more than one mole at a time? Like, let's imagine your hammer, your mallet, can just like smash down on the machine. That certainly would make the game a lot easier, right?
Yes. If you cheat, that tends to make games easier. That's kind of the point. Unfortunately, though, in the case of a game like Whack-A-Mole, or The Conversation About Hell, it's pretty obvious to other people when you're cheating. They'll probably just call you on it and say, "Hey, what are you doing? Did you seriously think you were going to get away with that?"
I think there's an advantage to a big picture approach to responding to the challenge of hell.
In fairness, right now, I have to say, I don't remember what you say next. I've seen this part before, but it was a while ago. So I don't exactly know for sure what you mean by a big picture approach. But I will say, equating it right off the bat with just cheating at the game, probably not the best introduction to the concept.
So for example, the problem of hell, well, it's often described like this. It's often described as, how could a loving God send people to hell? How can a loving God send people to hell? And so there's kind of a moral challenge here, you know?
No, in fact, I don't know, because that's not a moral challenge. That's not saying God wouldn't do it because it's immoral. It's not questioning God's morality. It's questioning the consistency of a being that's supposed to be all-loving, performing the least loving act imaginable, which of course is setting up a system by which people are tortured forever just for not believing it exists. Christians can swear up and down that that's what love looks like, but it's not, though. You got a real uphill battle convincing people that it is, and I don't think you've engaged in that battle whatsoever here. All you've basically said is, just ignore the battle and run away, at least in the last two parts. But yeah, frankly, morality has nothing to do with it. Even when people get mad at you personally for saying stuff like this, they're not really talking about morality in the sense of, abstract moral philosophy, something like the trolley problem, or like reasons for why you think things are right or wrong. You personally are saying something terrible about them personally. You think something terrible is going to happen to them personally, and you're saying, I think that's just fine, and I totally love the guy that's going to do it. You're not talking about some third party. You're not talking about some hypothetical scenario. It's a direct personal attack. I don't think the objection really is, you're doing an action that I consider immoral. I think it's more, you're spitting in my face right now, and I'm frankly not that much of a fan of it. Now, of course, this is part of the underlying foundation of human morality. This is part of why we have moral opinions. You don't want to live in a society where murder is accepted and encouraged because you and the people around you who you care about, to a greater or lesser extent, depending on who it is, will be affected by it, and generally speaking, it'll just be a much less happy society that nobody wants to live in. And so the motivation's kind of the same thing. It's pretty obvious. But that takes at least a little bit of thinking to get to. Whereas in this case, it's just, hey, can you stop telling me that I'm a worthless piece of shit that deserves to be tortured for all of eternity just because I didn't join your church? The directly personal stings a lot more than sort of broad social ideas, is my point. When you're the one being insulted in the most severe way possible, you don't exactly need to start talking about moral philosophy to explain why you're pissed.
It's unjust or immoral for God to do that. It's kind of smuggled in.
Well, again, that's a little bit beyond just people getting annoyed that you're saying this to them personally, but in a more broad, general objection to the concept, yeah, sure. The fact that it's unjust is certainly part of it. And I would say by definition, that's kind of true. I mean, what is a just response? It's kind of an equitable response. It matches the severity of the crime. And in this case, the severity of the crime is 0. You weren't convinced of something. Nobody was hurt at all. The only person who possibly could be hurt in this equation is God, getting his feelings hurt. And frankly, I'm pretty sure he can take it. I mean, he's supposed to be infinitely powerful, but what is he, just a giant pussy as well? I mean, it's not like you even have to say anything bad about the guy. You just have to not be convinced that he's even there. And frankly, if that bothers him, maybe he should just try putting in a bit more effort to make his presence convincing. But anyway, yeah, any punishment at all for something like this seems, by definition, unjust. The severity of punishment for a victimless crime, for a crime that causes no harm, is none. That's the equitable response. That's what would be warranted by the old school eye for an eye approach, let alone the Jesus turn the other cheek approach. So as far as I can tell, even within the context of the supposed morality of your own religion, it doesn't make any sense. Now, of course, we can quibble, as we do in the secular justice system all the time, about what constitutes an equitable response to a crime, or I should say action. I think it's kind of ridiculous to call this a crime. So there's wiggle room, right? If God feels insulted by you not believing in him, he could insult you back. He could not give you a cookie today. He could send you to your room for an hour. But I do feel like being burned alive forever and ever is possibly a bit of an overreaction. Perhaps that doesn't quite match the idea of an equivalently severe response that's implied by the word justice. Whatever, I'm just rambling now. I'm just talking off the cuff, because really, the whole point of this video was the just avoid talking about hell part. You know, that was the interesting part. Now we're kind of just back into stuff I've talked about 10 million times on this channel. If you really want to hear me talk about morality, there's about 30 old videos you could probably watch. I've beaten that dead horse into a finer pace than even lens flares in airports.
Well, from a big picture perspective, I think the problem of hell isn't the problem people think it is.
Well, I know you don't. That's why you're making a video like your video, not like my video.
What's the problem of hell if you're an atheist?
Oh, there's many problems, but it depends what you mean exactly. If you're talking about it on an interpersonal level, I already explained that. You're standing there in front of me saying some terrible shit about me to my face, and I don't appreciate being spoken about in that way. It's rude. But I don't think that's what you're talking about. I don't think you're talking about the problem that gets people all annoyed when you say it to them. Possibly, I don't know. I think more importantly, the question is, what's the problem of hell in terms of being an argument against Christianity? In which case the argument is the same regardless of whether you're an atheist, a Christian, or anything else. Because the problem doesn't involve anything from any worldview external to Christianity. Any particular atheist's worldview has no relevance. The issue is an inconsistency of the Christian worldview with itself, not with some atheistic worldview. You have a supposedly loving God behaving in an unloving way, and I'm sorry, but there's no way to square that circle, other than possibly redefining love as at best apathy and at worst hate, which turns the whole thing on its head and again makes it make no sense. So yeah, the problem of hell doesn't change if you're an atheist, or if you're a Christian, or if you're a giraffe. It's the same problem no matter what.
I want you to think about this. An atheist, and many admit this, has no moral ground to stand on while objecting to the immorality of hell.
It's really weird. I don't know when we switched the conversation onto morality. I don't think we were talking about morality. We're talking about the conflict of an all-loving entity performing unloving acts. Yeah, you know, people can have objections about you coming out and saying all these terrible things about people, and you can consider that a moral objection. But really, that's kind of just a secondary point. In fact, maybe not even that. It's not really even a point about hell, or even about God. That's really more of a point about you. What you're willing to accept, the terrible things that you're willing to believe about people, and what that says about you as a person. And sure, I could sit you down and try to explain to you, as if to a tiny child, why being a massive dickhole to everyone around you is probably not the best idea if you want to be accepted and liked. You know, humans are a social species, and we don't have a great deal of appreciation for people who are massively antisocial. I mean, all the asshole has to do is just be the asshole. Everyone else has to deal with the asshole. Nobody wants to do that. But of course that doesn't mean hell doesn't exist, that doesn't mean God doesn't exist. There could still be a hell and some terrifying Lovecraftian monster god that tortures you after you're dead. People might have moral objections to that, but that doesn't make it false. It only starts to be self-contradictory and false when you say, and it loves you! Like, words have definitions. When we say the word love, we actually mean something. It's not just a sound we make with our mouth. We're actually trying to represent something symbolically with the word. And I'm sorry, but what that word represents is not reflected in Monster God.
They may not like hell, but on their view, their worldview, they can't, it can't be an objective moral evil because nothing is objectively morally evil, right?
Okay, I'll get to that in a second, but again, just to be clear, you're not actually addressing the point at all. You're addressing a completely different point that has nothing to do with the point. I guess this is what you meant about cheating at whack-a-mole. Except I think my example about whack-a-mole was better. The one about just pretend you're playing a different game and then tell the guy you won it. That's much more accurate than the giant hammer. Now, as far as morality, as irrelevant as it is, and for the 10 million and first time, yeah, I don't believe in objective morality because I don't believe in objective values. Different animals have different needs, different social structures, and so on, and so they have different values. Within humanity itself, obviously, there's widely different cultures, people who come from very different histories, with very different ways of doing things, oftentimes with good reason, but therefore their values are different, not arbitrarily, but mostly from a very long history of handed-down experience, and personal experience. Certainly there are some values that are much more innate, survival-based ones, things like that. Those are more universal. And then on top of that, there are ones that are picked up from the collective experiences of the culture and from personal experience. This is often characterized as totally arbitrary and meaningless, just picked at random, and I think that's unbelievably stupid to say. These things are typically based on very real inputs, very real cues. These things are meant to address very real problems that have occurred in human history, in a specific region or culture's history, and in a specific person's history. And by the way, I do not exclude religious values from this. I think most of those were probably formed in the same way, based on some sort of experience people had. They saw certain activities creating outcomes that they didn't like at the time in that place, and they created rules against those activities, or in favor of activities that they saw were valuable. They expressed them in a very different way than someone like me would, but I think it's fundamentally the same thing. Generally speaking, humans tend to operate very similarly to each other. We're really not that different. So what I'm saying is, when you have these values that are responses to reality itself, to real conditions that somebody like you, or somebody at least, has experienced, in large part, then I think trying to denigrate them as just some random taste kind of makes you sound really dumb. Now, of course, this is in no way a defense of some objective, universal morality, because as far as I can tell, that concept doesn't make any sense in relation to humanity. It doesn't show any sign of being actually real, and if it were real, it wouldn't actually mean anything for us day to day. So whether it exists or not doesn't help us in any way with our interactions with each other, and so I really don't care. Something with no practical effect might as well not exist. And I mean no practical effect. What do you go to hell for? If I don't break any rules, but I also don't believe in God and Jesus, am I going to heaven? No, you go to hell for not believing, not for being immoral. You're not punished or rewarded for how well your actions line up with objective morality. You're punished or rewarded for how much you believed in Jesus. So in the real world, your objective morality has no impact, and in the afterlife, your objective morality has no impact. What the hell is the point? So yeah, human morality does not match this useless, pointless, ridiculous concept of objective morality. Or I should specify at least this universal Christian-style objective morality. I'm going to say some things going forward here that probably people like Sam Harris would call objective morality, but it's not the Christian-style objective morality, and that's what I'm talking about. The behaviors that we find are conducive to a society that we want to live in are not objectively true in all times, at all places, for all thinking beings, no matter what. They're a product of circumstance, even the more evolutionary-driven, instinct-driven ones. They're all a product of circumstance. But what does that actually mean? It means they're a product of reality. It means there were real inputs, real causes, real effects, real experiences, and we learned from them. We learned how these things made us feel, how they made other people feel, how they helped us or our group, or hindered us or our group. And from that, we figured out what it is that we value as people. And values are the basis of morality. Now you can make decisions based on your values. And now you can get into the real discussion of morality, which is how individual human actions relate to human values. We learned what kind of actions on an individual scale or on a broad scale produce certain kinds of outcomes, and we decided based on that what we consider to be a good action or to be a bad action, based on how it fits our values. This is real knowledge in action in real life. And of course, sometimes we're incorrect. Sometimes people attribute effects to causes that weren't actually the cause. I think religion tends to do that quite often, right? Nobody can be perfectly rational. But that's life, man. It's messy. It's hard to know everything. There's gonna be disagreements. But you know what? It makes a whole lot more sense than just saying, I'm objectively right because I say so and fuck you, which is all you ever do. Anyway, I think I kind of got sidetracked there. Back to the values thing. Typically, I find most people value peace, safety, comfort. They like to stay alive. They like to not feel pain. They like their friends and family to stay alive and not feel pain. And of course, we're a very, very social species, so a lot of us tend to broaden that out far beyond just a circle of friends and family, and to an extent feel empathy and sympathy and good wishes towards people that we've never even met. Now, of course, this doesn't apply to you. We're the out group to you, and you think we should burn alive forever. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I'm not going to try to diagnose you with something, but either there's some level of like sociopathy going on there, or your religion is fucking poison. It's weird, I find this a lot. It's a religion that tends to preach all the time about love, and yet there really doesn't seem to be a whole lot on display, especially when people are discussing this topic. The only people who seem to get any love are people who you agree with, and everyone else can just go hang, or much, 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 much worse. But people who haven't been consumed by some kind of poisonous ideology that makes them hate everyone who doesn't agree with them, be it religious or political or whatever, tend to want people in general to get along in peace and prosperity and happiness. Because really, if you create a world where the vast majority of people have the ability to have nice little lives, not torn apart by war and famine and so on, not forced to act against their own conscience, because of course everyone's got a different opinion on what's right, yourself included, and your opinion isn't magically the most valid one just because you say it's objectively correct, you fucking idiot. Anyone can say that. Tons of people do who disagree with you. It doesn't make you special. If you create a world like that, if most people act in a way that enables and promotes that sort of society, then the lives of people you don't know, of course, will get better, but so likely will the lives of people that you do know, and your own life. At the very least, there'll be a much better chance of it. And as well, you kind of have to be the change you want to see. I mean, if you're going around society just attacking people, causing pain and grief and terror to everyone, what are you making better? You're not making anything better, not even for yourself. Whether there's a hell or not, whether there's some sort of objective morality woven into the fabric of the universe or not, shit still comes back around to bite you eventually. Not always, but pretty goddamn often, to the point that you're probably better off assuming it's going to. And plus, because of our history as a species, most people tend to be social enough by default that to act like some kind of a monster is kind of to create your own personal hell inside your head. Most people couldn't even bring themselves to do it, and the ones who find some way to do it oftentimes do so because they're tortured already, or they end up torturing themselves as a consequence, psychologically. And all this taken together, trying to live with yourself, trying to create a world you actually want to live in, and expecting others not to try to tear it apart and fuck it up for everyone else. That's what morality is, in real life. Not in fantasy land where the universe itself wants something, and after you're dead you'll get the carrot or the stick. But in real life, where you have to deal with other people, where you have to argue with other people, where if you have some new policy you want to put in, you have some new way of doing things that you think might be better for people, you actually have to make your case, you have to argue with other people, at least if you want to convince them to do it, or you want it to be a law, or what have you. That is real life morality. That's how it works in grown-up world. Not this childish, these are the rules, I read them in a book, that's good enough for me. I don't need anything else. I don't need to think about anything I ever do. There's no gray areas, there's no nuance. Nothing this book doesn't mention is a problem for society, and nothing this book says is a problem for society is actually not. Even if it was written for people in a completely different situation who might have needed a bit of a different way of doing things from how we do things now. Morality is what's written here and only what's written here, and that's it. And then weirdly, despite saying that, most people don't actually seem to live their life that way. They come up with their own moral opinions, which of course is why there seems to be no limit to the number of sects of Christianity, all with their own moral ideas. People develop their own morality through their life experience independently of the book, and then they try to think about the book in a way that's compatible with that. And then if you say that to them, they deny it like hell. The point being, I guess, after all that rambling, that even if there is some kind of objective morality in the universe, which as a concept doesn't even make sense to me, but let's say there is one thing that is right, and everything else just is wrong, that has no actual impact on the real world. Because even if you believe there is an objective morality, you're still going to have to make a subjective decision about what you think that objective morality is. Even if you think it's whatever's written in the Bible, that's the objective morality, you still have to come to the subjective opinion that the Bible is in fact infallibly true. And then you have to assume that your subjective interpretation of what it says, which is not always entirely clear, is in fact what was meant by the original author. So even if you think you're basing your life on the one true objective morality, you're still coming to the conclusion that that even is the objective morality through your own subjective reasoning and your own subjective interpretation and your belief that just because God declares something moral, that makes it objectively moral. I mean, that there is definitely a subjective opinion. I don't hold that opinion at all. So really, again, it's just the morality that you subjectively think is the right one. Everyone has their own personal reasons for thinking that what they think is right or what they think is wrong is right or is wrong. And that includes you. That includes every religious person who rants on and on about how atheists have no objective morality. We're all just fumbling our way through everything, trying to figure out what the right thing to do is in accordance with our own values, and our own beliefs, and our own ideas about what the effect of a given action is going to be, and which outcome is more or less harmful, or more or less helpful. And this applies to the people who think they're objectively right just as much as it applies to the people who don't. Because this is kind of just a fundamental aspect of the human condition. It's just a thing we do. We're trying to get along with each other. This is what we do to do that. On this issue, we're all in the same boat. Some of us just don't realize it. Alright, I'm gonna call that a video, but I'm definitely gonna come back for more of this because I just like it. I'm enjoying it. So thank you very much for watching. Of course, to all of my supporters on every platform, thank you the most of anyone. Your support over the years has been amazing. Thank you so much. If you want videos a bit early, sign up to my email list at list.logicked.com. Oh, and before you go, please give the video a like and click subscribe. See you next time.